Arirang News, I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. The South Korean footballer with the most goals in Europe ever, Tottenham Hotspur star Son Heung-min, bags a brace of goals in the Champions League to write himself into the history books. Poles apart on price, South Korea and the United States have very different ideas about how much Seoul should pay for the American troop presence on the peninsula. We have the details. Plus, stable but issues to address. S&P maintains South Korea's sovereign credit rating at AA with a stable outlook. The country has stayed at the same level since 2016. Now, it's not often that we begin with sports, but today we'll make an exception. Tottenham Hotspur striker Son Heung-min is now the top South Korean scorer in European club football history with 123 goals in his European career. He has surpassed the record set by another legendary Korean player who made a habit of hitting the back of the net in Germany's top league throughout the 1980s. Park Se-young with more.
Adding a pair of goals to his tally, Son Heung-min is now the top-scoring South Korean in European club football history. The striker for Tottenham Hotspur netted 2 goals in the Premier League club's 4-0 victory over Red Star Belgrade in their Group B match of the UEFA Champions League on Tuesday. Son's goals in the 57th and 61st minute were his 122nd and 123rd of his European career, putting him above former Bundesliga star Cha Bum-gun for the most goals scored by a South Korean player in Europe. Son has scored 5 goals in 4 Champions League appearances this season, netting in 3 straight games in the competition for the first time in his career. The new record was set amid concerns over Son's state of mind following his tackle on Everton's Andre Gomez last Sunday that led to a fractured dislocation of the midfielder's right ankle. After his first goal of the match, Son said sorry down the lens and appeared to apologize by bringing his hands together in a praying gesture. Following the match, he said he didn't want to celebrate because he wanted to respect the situation and that he felt really sorry about it. With the victory, Tottenham are in a strong position for a spot in the Champions League knockout stages. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Turning now to the visit to Seoul by the top U.S. negotiator in defense cost sharing. It was assumed he was here to gauge the public sentiment in South Korea toward paying a hefty tab for the U.S. troop presence on the peninsula. However, during his talks with officials on Wednesday, some numbers were thrown out there, including a demand that Seoul fund certain U.S. military assets not even based in Korea, and that hasn't gone down particularly well. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
With James DeHart, the top U.S. negotiator in defense cost-sharing talks in Seoul, sources say the United States is demanding South Korea pay as much as 5 times more in 2020 compared to this year's 10th Special Measures Agreement. The U.S. is also reportedly demanding Seoul pay for U.S. military asset management costs related to security on the Korean peninsula. This means DeHart pressed South Korea to pay for U.S. military assets stationed outside of the Korean peninsula. It would mean Seoul will have to bear the cost of asset management at other U.S. bases, such as Guam and Hawaii, assets which would be deployed to the peninsula in case of an emergency. To meet Washington's demand for the 11th Special Measures Agreement, Seoul will have to pay 5 times more in 2020, a figure approaching $5 billion. Officials in Seoul say it's unfair to share the cost of U.S. forces that are not even in Korea. Yoon Sang-hyun, a lawmaker for South Korea's main opposition Liberty Korea Party and chairman of the National Assembly's Foreign Affairs Committee, met with DeHart on Wednesday. Yoon said he raised Seoul's concerns that an excessive demand could adversely affect the alliance, which is based on trust and friendship. With the 3rd round of negotiations to be held in Seoul later this month, watchers say the unpredictable nature of President Trump and South Korea's unwillingness to pay so much means the U.S. could use troop reduction as a negotiating card. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The visiting top U.S. diplomat for East Asia had a packed schedule on Wednesday, meeting with South Korean officials on a whole range of issues. David Stilwell is here at a crunch time. A military intel sharing pact between Seoul and Tokyo, largely facilitated by Washington, is just weeks away from lapsing after South Korea pulled out over Japan's hostile trade policies. Kim Min-ji reports.
U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs David Stilwell had marathon meetings with South Korean officials Wednesday, amid speculation that the talks focused on GSOMIA, the joint military intel sharing pact between Seoul and Tokyo that's set to expire in a few weeks. But not much is known about the closed-door discussions. Speaking to reporters after talks with Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa and Vice Foreign Minister Cho Se-young, Stilwell said that he sees a recent meeting between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on the sidelines of the ASEAN meetings as encouraging.
Very encouraged while we were there to note that President Moon and Prime Minister Abe had the opportunity to talk, and that's an encouraging sign as we watch the relationship improve.
Stilwell also emphasized that the South Korea-U.S. alliance is the linchpin of peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region. He didn't answer questions about GSOMIA, but his remarks are seen as portraying Washington's stance that it wants the deal extended for trilateral security cooperation. In August, Seoul decided not to extend the pact in response to Japan's economic retaliation over a court ruling ordering Japanese firms to compensate South Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. During talks later in the day with South Korea's Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Hyun-jung, they covered various issues including GSOMIA and cost-sharing of U.S. troops stationed on the Korean peninsula. The presidential office said in a statement that the two sides had constructive and future-oriented discussions on the matter, with Kim explaining Seoul's stance, while Stilwell reiterated that their bilateral alliance is a linchpin to security in Northeast Asia. Stilwell also sat down for talks with Seoul's Deputy Defense Minister Chung Seok-kwan to discuss the security situation on the Korean peninsula and ways to cooperate further for the development of their alliance. Arriving at the Defense Ministry, he was asked whether GSOMIA was discussed in his previous meetings, to which he said he had fantastic discussions with officials on topics of agreement. But it's unclear whether that included GSOMIA. It appears that while Stilwell refrained from pressuring officials in public, he likely explained Washington's position during the meetings. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Seoul's top nuclear envoy travels to Moscow this afternoon to discuss North Korea's denuclearization with his Russian counterpart. South Korea's special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, Lee Do-hoon, is scheduled to sit down with Igor Morgulov, who is Russia's deputy foreign minister. He will also attend the 2019 Moscow Non-Proliferation Conference, which kicks off today. While he's there, he is likely to meet North Korean diplomat Jo Chol-soo and U.S. Special Envoy Mark Lambert. Diplomats from China and Japan are also due at the conference. Now, North Korea is furious over a planned joint military drill between South Korea and the United States, calling it a declaration of confrontation. In a statement carried by the North's state-run Korean Central News Agency on Wednesday, an official from the North's foreign ministry claimed the drill, if held, would violate an agreement reached by the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. at their Singapore summit. The statement came just a day after officials in Seoul and Washington said they would skip their annual joint air exercise known as Vigilant Ace and instead hold a scaled-back drill. Now, despite South Korea lowering its growth rate for this year, global ratings agency Standard & Poor's has kept the country's rating stable at AA. It said the South Korean economy remains in decent shape despite some potential downside risks. Yoon Jung-min has its report.
Standard & Poor's has maintained South Korea's sovereign credit rating at AA for over 3 years now. The global ratings agency explained South Korea's economy has strong fundamentals and is well diversified, meaning it doesn't depend on a certain industry or export. It added the country's growth rate is solid compared to other high-income countries. It also forecasts South Korea's GDP per capita to rise from about $32,000 this year to $35,000 in 2022. Short-term GDP growth is expected to hover at around 2%, according to the ratings agency. S&P saw South Korea's economy as rather stable based on its foreign bond status and sound fiscal performance, which is unlikely to turn to a deficit even though the government's revenue is slowly declining. However, S&P says South Korea's exports have been slowing and the trade spat between Seoul and Tokyo has raised uncertainties, which in turn have affected investment sentiment. It recommended South Korea increase its productivity, especially considering its rapidly aging population. It also warned of higher household debt, but took into account efforts to lower the risks of bankruptcy by reining in the lending sector. Another possible risk, the agency says, is the security threat posed by North Korea. S&P has kept South Korea's rating at AA since August 2016, when it was upgraded from AA-. Other global ratings agencies, including Moody's and Fitch, also have South Korea's rating as stable. Heungmin, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics has spent more on semiconductors than any of its global competitors over the past few years as it bids to lead the global market going forward. According to market researcher IC Insights on Thursday, the tech giant's capital expenditure on semiconductors from 2017 to 2019 amounted to almost $66 billion. Intel, the second largest spender, spent $43 billion over the same period. Samsung plans to make massive investments in memory chip infrastructure to prepare for the future. Other leading chip makers are also expected to have increased their investments. Now, the proportion of births from multicultural families among the total number of births here in South Korea hit a record high last year, according to Statistics Korea, while the number of children born in multicultural families decreased 2% on year in 2018. Their proportion hit a record 5.5%. Vietnamese mothers comprise more than 1/3 of births in multicultural families. 1/5 were Chinese. The number of international marriages also reached a 4-year high in 2018. Now let's start our world news in the United States and the local elections that may offer some clues, at least, to how next year's presidential election could unfold. Still a long way to go, of course. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Da-mi. So, Da-mi, tell us how these elections panned out.
Mark, the Democrats on Wednesday secured wins in Kentucky, Virginia, and New Jersey. In Kentucky, Democratic Attorney General Andy Beshear scored a narrow victory over Governor Matt Bevin, despite an election eve rally headlined by U.S. President Donald Trump. In his speech in Kentucky on Monday night, President Trump told voters that they needed to re-elect Bevin, or else pundits would say Trump suffered the greatest defeat in the history of the world. Kentucky is where Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 30 percentage points in 2016. So Beshear's victory marks a significant setback for Trump, who has long maintained his popularity in the state. Democrats also snatched both chambers of Virginia's legislature from narrow Republican majorities, giving the party complete control of the state government for the first time in 25 years. In Mississippi, Republican Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves defeated Attorney General Jim Hood, who is a moderate Democrat who favors gun rights and opposes abortion rights. While those local elections could give us a glimpse at the big one in 2020, the Democrat-led House of Representatives Intelligence Committee will kick off a series of public hearings next week in its impeachment inquiry against President Trump. According to the committee's chairman, William Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State George Kent will testify next Wednesday. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, will be in the hot seat 2 days later. Iran continues to distance itself from its 2015 nuclear deal, this time by stepping up activity at its underground Fordow nuclear plant. The spokesman for the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran told state TV on Wednesday that the agency delivered 2,000 kilograms of uranium to the plant, emphasizing that it was all conducted under the supervision of UN inspectors. Iran's move means Fordow will move it from its permitted status of research plant to an active nuclear site. To discuss Iran's continuous violations, the International Atomic Energy Agency will hold on Thursday a closed-door meeting in Austria. Unbearable air pollution in India is not only risking people's health there, but is also threatening the local economy, as tourists turn their back on one of the country's most well-known cities. New Delhi is a hot tourist spot well known for its historical buildings and structures. But according to local media reports, the number of flights arriving in New Delhi from October 27th to November 5th dropped 17% compared to the same period last year. The city's air quality has deteriorated to the hazardous category with a high potential to cause respiratory illnesses.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. It is Thursday, so we thought we'd turn our focus to culture. The weekend isn't that far away. To introduce us to some cultural events to check out, I'm happy to say our Heungmin Son joins us in the studio today. So what do you have for us today, Heungmin Son?
Hi, Mark. One of the largest international events for craft art is being held in South Korea's central city, Cheongju, in Chungcheongbuk-do province. The 11th Cheongju Craft Biennale opened on October 8th and runs through November 17th. It's the first international craft festival solely devoted to craft art and a place for leading and emerging craft artists to show off the traditional beauty and contemporary value of craft arts. 5 main exhibitions and 3 special exhibitions are being held at several venues across the city, displaying some 2,000 pieces of craft and by 1,200 artists from 36 countries. Culture Factory C is the main venue. It used to be a tobacco factory, but it has been turned into a cultural facility where artists from around the world can share their work. Exhibitions display items from metal, ceramic, wood, textile, and glass, and showcases the diversity and artistic efforts to connect traditional values with the practical values of the modern times. Let's hear from the director.
Our Biennale shows a new and experimental value. It's more than just making and presenting good artworks, so I created the exhibition space. That's comfortable for all. I wanted to present not only traditional crafts, but also various aspects of craft art from the past, present, and future.
Well, Min-san, you really did catch some amazing looking craft work in the video you shot while you were down there. I was just wondering about, though, how it shows the difference between the past and the future of what crafts look like now in South Korea.
The craft art started with making objects that are useful in our daily lives. So every craft had specific use and purpose. But at the Biennale, artists extended the concept of craft and even converged with various genres of art. This giant teacup and teapot installation art is created by a Nigerian artist who used over 10,000 ceramic teacups. The use of teacups is the past and the present, and the way it's displayed shows the future and potential of craft arts. Representing this concept is this year's theme, which is Dreaming of Crafts of the Future, Mongyu-do-won Unfolds. Mongyu-do-won-do means the dream journey to the immortal peach orchard in Korea, and is the title of one of the greatest paintings created by Angyeon in 1447 during the Joseon dynasty.
Some amazing pieces of work there. Really looks like something worth checking out. But are there any specific parts you'd personally recommend, having been there yourself, to people who might want to go along?
Along with the main exhibitions, 3 special exhibitions feature 271 crafts by 106 artists from 13 countries, Denmark, Hungary, China, and 10 ASEAN countries. And the ASEAN exhibition has been prepared to celebrate the 30th anniversary of building relations between South Korea and ASEAN countries. Crafts from 10 ASEAN countries show the unique culture of each of the countries, yet display some common characteristics that exist across ASEAN culture. Visitors can walk around and look at the craft arts that represent these countries in one place.
As a local resident, it's great to have a cultural space that can host art exhibitions like this, and we don't have to travel to other cities. I've come to this craft biennale every time, and this year's event gave me a nice surprise and good experience. I'm very satisfied.
On the weekend, visitors can also participate in Art Bridge program that connects 7 art museums and galleries in Cheongju. Those with tickets to the Biennale can participate in the tour bus program that runs free of charge. Those who want to take some craft home with them can check out Cheongju Craft Fair taking place at the main venue. It's a global craft marketplace with some 150 participating artists and shops. Visitors can purchase small items or make their own craft art at the experience space. Tickets are quite reasonably priced at 12,000 won or about $10. There are still more than a week left, so it's worth checking out.
Well, Min-san, thank you very much for that information. At $10 per person, it sounds like a great way to spend the day. And you say there's a craft shop there too, so you can pick up something as a souvenir to take home with you as well. As always, Min-san, thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Now, with that, let's take a quick look at some cultural events coming up here in South Korea.
Good morning. Dress warmly on your way out. Chilly air will be with us all day today, and we are expecting big drop in temperatures just in time for Friday, which is Ipdong, the beginning of winter, according to the traditional calendar. So our evening commute will be a chilly one as well, as cold air will drive the low to just 1 degree Celsius tomorrow morning here in the capital. And colder winds this afternoon will blow away the dust in the central region, but do expect somewhat high levels of fine dust throughout the morning. It's going to feel cool all day today, and daily highs will be a couple notches lower than Wednesday, and Seoul will get up to 14 degrees, Chuncheon topping out at 15 degrees this afternoon. And as for the weather outlook, we have rain in the forecast on Sunday, which will linger into next Monday. And we are expecting another huge drop in temperatures next Thursday, which is the day of Suneung, Korea's college entrance exam day. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for views around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now on this Thursday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Our next newscast is at noon Korea time in around 90 minutes from now. So until then, goodbye.
Emerging Innovators aims to strengthen the manufacturing competitiveness